Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Aachen, the founder of Chop Local. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at choplocaluniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Before we get into this next episode, I wanted to let you know about one of our other resources that we offer. If you are in a hurry to see meat marketing results fast, then the Meat Commerce Essentials course is perfect for you. It covers everything that you need to know to sell meat online successfully, and it's presented in short video snippets to get you the info that you need to put into action as quickly as possible. For a limited time, we're offering our podcast listeners $100 off the course using coupon code POD100. That's POD100. Just visit choplocaluniversity.com to find the course and be sure to enter POD100 at checkout. Welcome back to another episode of the Meat Success Podcast. I'm Katie Olthoff, the co-founder of Chop Local and Chop Local University. And joined with me today is a farmer that I worked with, I think it's been about 1.5 years ago now, maybe almost 2 years ago, that Rachel saw a presentation that I did on a webinar and reached out for help getting her marketing started for her farm. She has a really interesting farm story that is probably different from a lot of you listening, and so I'm really excited to have Rachel Jantzi join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Tell people a little bit about your farm as it is right now, and then we'll go into kind of the backstory about how you got here. But tell us where your farm's located, what you're growing, and how you are selling it.
I'm located in northeastern British Columbia, Canada, and I currently have 200 laying hens. Last year and this year I'll be raising 1,100 meat birds, and I have this year, new to me, is having 5 sheep, so I'll have lambs in the fall and pork in the fall. This will be the second time doing pork.
Your farm is located in British Columbia, you said, and the pictures that I've seen are just gorgeous. There's mountains in the background. You're not in the mountains, really. You're kind of at the edge of the mountainous region, is that right, or no?
Between the Rocky Mountains and the Caribou Mountains. So when I'm driving through the mountain ranges. But yeah, I can see the mountains on both sides of me.
They're so beautiful. Okay. And the farm is called Grazing Patch Farm. You came up with this. I was looking back through our notes from when we worked together on your website and your logo and everything, and you came up with Grazing Patch Farm and then the tagline, regenerating one patch at a time. And I thought that was so clever and just really spoke to what your priorities and values are. So let's back up and tell everybody a little bit about how you decided to become a farmer and you decided to go out to British Columbia and start your farm.
Yeah, so I grew up farming as a kid, and later in my teens, I became known locally as a person who farm sat and then also pet sat people's homes and farms, whether pork, dairy, or sheep. And then I went to university and college. I've done a bunch of stuff. I've got a carpentry and a plumbing apprenticeship. And I also worked quite a few years on a large organic vegetable farm. And there I worked everywhere from the fields to the warehouse, delivery driver, and then later in the office and did dispatch and purchasing. And so I really got a full breadth experience there. Later I built robots in the city and worked for a cool tech company. So that was pretty neat coming from a farming background. And there I got to learn all the builds of the robots and I became team lead. But I also started working with engineers on new product development. So working with drawings and, even procurement of parts and things like that. So I don't know, all of this kind of varied experience really has actually helped me now because I feel confident buying things or purchasing all the things for this farm stuff, whether big and small, and the practical things like plumbing and carpentry certainly help because I built all my buildings. So somewhere in there, a couple years ago, a friend mentioned regenerative agriculture because I grew up conventional farming, and then I worked for a few years organic farming, but then I learned regenerative farming, and that somehow just clicked for me, and it seemed to make sense. Animals working with nature and building the soil, and everything gets healthier. The animals and the plants get healthier, and we get healthier. And it's with all these climate extremes, it actually really helps the soils be stronger in droughts and like the nutrient runoff. Like a lot of our climate issues, it can really help be more resilient. So that was inspiring to me. And also the people I follow really are about making living wage while doing this. So it's like a hopeful way of farming. It's producing really good food for local community, and you're making a living wage. So it all made sense to me. And I worked at 2 other regenerative farms, and before March 2024, that's when I started my own farm. I arrived in BC, and I was actually looking all across British Columbia where to farm. And I was working with an organization that matches landowners with farmers looking for land. And we found a match here.
You're from Eastern Canada.
Yeah, I'm from Eastern Canada.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so it was a big move out here, and yeah, totally new space.
Why didn't you look for a farm closer to where you were living at the time? Why did you decide to go to British Columbia?
Because I had an opportunity with some friends. One of the friends lives in British Columbia, and we kind of all thought that we could purchase this. So we purchased land together, like a small 20-acre property, and they were going to retire on it, and I was going to be the farmer on it because they knew I was interested. So it was kind of going to be a nice multi-generational situation. And so we had that in the plan for a couple years. And when I came out here, we kind of had some discussions, like the one person's husband passed away and some other life change for someone else. And I had been reading and following these farming mentors who it's kind of becoming clear to me that maybe leasing is better than owning because all the money is in the purchase. All my money was there. And now that I see what I've had to spend to build everything and purchasing stuff, I couldn't have imagined doing it. Like I wouldn't have, I needed that. I needed my savings because my life savings was in that land. So I was able to sell my portion to the others. And, I didn't make a bunch of money because they were friends. But that's then what really helped me.
It freed up so that you had some cash to then build. And like you said, you mentioned earlier, like you've built all of your buildings. And people can go to your Facebook page, Grazing Patch Farm, and see. But when you say built your buildings, you're talking about there's small portable huts for the pigs and things like that. We're not talking about like gigantic confinement buildings, obviously, or anything like that, right?
Yeah, no, all of it is mobile shelters. So for the layers, and they have like perches, and they need solar light so that they stay in lay, and then the pig house, and then I had 2 feed boxes that can hold 4,500 pounds of feed each, and I can drag them with. And then I did have to build an egg cooler inside, so it's a 4x6 room with a cool bot and air conditioner that keeps the eggs at 4 degrees. And then I have to build winter housing for the layers, which is just, it's not really building the house, it's only updating the current house that I find and insulating it and building the perches and putting exhaust fans in and their outside access because I want them to have outside access all winter depending on weather. And before I started too, like after I worked at other farms, I had a massive Excel sheet. And some of these Excel sheets I got from other courses that I took and other farmers. And it's a financial sheet, but I basically planned everything before I even bought one thing. So for I think it was 3 months, like 10, 12 hours a day, I was on these Excel sheets. So it's like, okay, so I need to build the layer house. What does that mean? And because I'm not organic certified, but I wanted to follow the practices, I read the organic standards. I figured out what was the spacing needed, what was the purchase needed, what was the nest required. And then I bought based on that. And then because then I could find suppliers and then I could price stuff out. So I literally had everything priced out for those builds. So I even priced out the lumber needed for building the layer house. And so every enterprise had the expenses pretty well laid out. And then I was doing the work before buying of finding where I could buy them. So like the waterers and the feeders, even researching what's the best water, what the best feeders are. So all of that, like I've got massive Excel sheets, and then I also figured out like how much does a chicken eat at what age and what protein needs. And then I looked at different feed companies and put out the maximum bulk feed I could buy. So I could scale, so even my numbers of how many I started with 100 layers. I started with only 200 meat chickens, but to try so I could get bulk feed prices. But I knew it was important that they had the right feed for the right age, because that's what really makes them a good product, whether it's meat being tasting good and them growing well and growing healthy, that they're not just being sick or dying, and the laying hens, that they stay at their optimal production. And so that's how, like, I really stand by, if you're starting farming, to do the numbers, because the numbers make the plan happen, but they also tell you when you're spending money. So I was like spending this money. I was like, wow, I've never spent so much money in my life. But it was planned, like I knew it, and I was within my budget. But then when I was spending, it was like scary to spend, but I actually felt good because I'm like, no, I actually did plan for it.
Yeah, you were so prepared. I mean, I know you did a lot of preparation, more than most people. And so it wouldn't surprise me if you tell me, yeah, my numbers were really accurate and I didn't have to stray too much from it. But I also know that when you're planning something, especially a business venture, there are unknown expenses that come up sometimes. Did you find that your Excel spreadsheet stayed pretty true to what was happening? Or were there those unknowns or those new expenses that you really had to adjust for?
I was close, but yeah, I spent a bit over. One, I found out like northern British Columbia, like we are so far away from major cities, like 8 hours away from the major routes. So the cost of my display freezer, for example, the shipping cost the same. So that was expensive. And I found some places could ship for cheaper. I bought a lot of stuff from the United States. There's some really great, like Premier One is amazing, or Hen Gear is amazing. I can't imagine purchasing now. Like I'm really happy it was in 24. But even that, there was certainly some duties and stuff, but I also had to pay for it to go to Alberta and then to here. But it was still within reason. And there was something else like I hadn't planned for, so I bought a market trailer. So I had a livestock trailer that I purchased, and then a big trailer for my freezers, my four big freezers, because that's going to be where I store my meat, but also pick up meat. But I didn't plan for the smaller one, which wasn't too expensive, but it made a huge difference from market day. I could just roll up, unroll my ramp, and roll my stuff out. So that's, yeah, a little bit more, but it stayed pretty well within.
So that's a good segue into your marketing. So you're selling at farmers markets locally. Have those projections, have you been able to sell what you're producing? How has that been working out for you?
Yeah, so I think I'm partly lucky because in the north here, everything is so expensive. So it's also, we drive far to get feed, we drive far to get slaughter. Like it's a 7-hour round trip for slaughter, and I do it once a month all summer. And feed is 12-hour round trip. And getting chicks, well, I try to tie it in with the feed, but there's a bit of logistics because they're 8 hours away. Or I can get a flight of chicks 2 hours away, which is 4 hours round trip. So that just makes it so hard. So many people I've talked to are like, no, we don't even do chicken because it's too hard. So that opens up for me the market. And plus what I'm raising in the north is more conservative, so they like that organic stuff, probably even more than some of the regenerative stuff. They think the regenerative stuff is just the way it used to be, like the old time farming. So they love that. So the markets totally worked. And I found sales more than I expected because of where I am. It's hard to get to the markets. My best market in the city is now 2.5 hours away. So it's a 5-hour drive together. And the other market is now closer, half-hour away. So you got to drive for the markets, but they want your stuff. They want my chicken for sure, 100%. They want the chicken. So I was going to start with 200 meat chickens in the first year. I doubled to 400 right away because sales were clear. And then 1,100 the next year if the sales are clear.
And are your meat chickens, when they're processed, are they processed as whole chickens or are you doing chicken parts? I can't remember.
I do both, but there's a percentage, so it's 30% whole and 70% parts essentially. And that's kind of pretty even sales. I will run out of whole a bit quicker, but it's also for me more economic. I make more with the parts. But most people are busy and you just want a part to cook up, like me too. Now that I have the choice, give me the parts.
I totally agree. I think that there are a lot of home cooks, and I would probably be one of them. I've roasted a turkey before because we raise turkeys, but I don't think that I've ever cooked a whole chicken myself. And, I'm going to go for chicken parts every time. And that is one thing that I'm guessing it's the same in Canada, but in the United States especially, it's hard to find poultry processors that can do those parts like that. A lot of in the States, we have an on farm exemption where you can process whole chickens yourself on the farm and sell them, but you can't do the parts. You have to find a processor to partner with to do the parts. So that makes it harder for people. But it sounds like that round trip drive has been worth it for you, like you said. So
The thing about the markets, like one of the marketing things we did was a big banner, and that was so effective. Out of the other farmers who sell stuff, I really had a display that people could see. So the banner explains what I'm doing. It says what I'm selling from a distance. They don't have to even come close. And then they know where I'm located because location is really important for farmers markets. They can see in the picture how it looks and the whole idea of why I'm doing it. And I also got a display freezer, so like the ice cream. Lots of people, some of the kids come up and think it's ice cream, but it's a nice way to display the meat and people can see it, and I think that really helps with sales.
when we were first setting up your website and everything, I did the farmers market banner for you. But for the display freezer, I don't think I did that. I think that was one of the projects where I gave you the Canva files and you had the fonts and the colors and we had the photos and you made those. Were they like magnets that stick on the display freezer, or what did you end up using to put on that display freezer for signage?
Yeah, so for signage, I bought a roll of magnetic strip and I cut them into nice labels, and then I found labels like Amazon, white sticker labels, and I printed on those. So I printed the page, cut them, and then I put clear plastic over top to keep it nice. And so yeah, the price per product, they could see that from a distance too, because I tried to make it so not everybody wants to come up close to a booth, but this way they could see and they could hum and haw already before even coming up.
We did talk, I remember at one point, it's windy up there. And you said sometimes the signage, like the big sign, we made like oh gosh, I want to say it's like 8x3 or 10x3 vinyl sign. Vinyl, is that what it was? Was vinyl? That's what you hung from the farmer's market tent, the tent that you had over your booth. But did you have any other issues with the wind, or do you just have some days where you can't put that up?
No, I always could put it up, and I held it with, there's these bungee balls. It's like bungee with a ball, and you can tie it up pretty tight. The only issue I've had with wind is when I put my side wall up. Don't put that up in wind because it totally acts like a sail. I had the whole tent with weights move. So I don't put the side wall up, but I've never had an issue with the sign because I think it's because it's high enough and it is narrow enough that it doesn't become a sail. But yeah, so that's sign. If I wanted to spend a bit more money, the other thing I would do at a farmer's market, which I think would be really effective, is an A-frame outside the booth. Because that A-frame, I think, would really bring people in too, depending how busy your market is, and they can walk from the direction and they can see.
Was that sign that we made, I should have looked this up, but the sign that hangs on your tent, is it about 3 feet or was it more like 2 feet? Do you remember?
I think it's like 2.5.
So about 2.5, because that's one thing we talked about is if we make it too big, either you're going to be standing in front of it, or if you put it at the front of the booth, it's going to be in front of you, and that sort of thing. So, but it sounds like it worked out pretty well. So,
Yeah, yeah, that worked out. And since then, because I had that design, like it was so great that I could use it because I now go into the winter market, which is inside, and I only have like a 4 foot by 5 foot spot to put my sign. So I made a new one based on that other one, which is really great.
yeah, so you use the Canva files that we had and you were able to manipulate those a little bit. Yeah.
And I do that all the time. Like we did tear off posters. I used that recently for Christmas to put out, like this one place I sell, they know I sell eggs, but they didn't necessarily know I sell chicken. So I updated that, and for Christmas it was like a nice roast chicken, and that really helped. I saw a lot of people did tear off stuff, and I used like I made my own egg carton label, but I used all the fonts and our logos and everything that Katie designed. I just used them and made stuff up. So it was just the tool that I needed I could just, and it was busy. Like the first year, it's insane. You're just going and going. So just having that, and that was the one thing I paid for was marketing because it's not exactly my forte, but I could just use it. And I made postcards.
I remember you saying that finances, you felt pretty good about working on finances, and with your spreadsheets, it sounds like it. And then obviously you had the building skills, which I had no idea till you started posting on social media. I remember you posting right at the beginning, like you couldn't get the solar heater or the solar electricity to work or something, and you were talking on social media on your page about circuits and all of these things and getting advice from people, and it was like way over my head. And I just thought this is such a good example of like Rachel has her skill set, which yes, you were struggling a little bit with the solar panels. That is so far beyond what I could do, and I have my skill set of marketing and the design, and so it worked out really well for me to be able to take care of setting up the website and making the logo and doing all of those things that are my strengths while you were working on the things that only you could do there on the farm.
Yeah, absolutely. And like building the website was huge. Like building that website and an online store. You had to figure out the whole system and everything. And then when you were done, like to show me, here, this is da-da-da, and then I just took it on. I could never have done that in the first year.
Well, and I love that you were willing and ready. A lot of farmers start with farmers markets, which is what you did, but a lot of them don't move into the online ordering or email marketing until later on. And that was one of the things that we set up for you right away was we're going to get the website with e-commerce set up so that people can order online. And we're going to set it up so that you can start collecting email addresses right away and start your email marketing. And so I'm hoping that that worked out the way that we were planning, where you're at the farmer's market, you could get their email address, get them onto the list, and then help them become regular customers. Is that the way that it worked out in reality?
Yeah, well, that was like one of your courses that you taught at Chop Local. So I knew that from the beginning. So I got that paper and clipboard on the farmer's market table, which I was surprised most people actually signed up that way. I kind of thought they'd do more of the QR code and stuff. But there are the people that do the QR code. And a lot of people recently are signing up from the website pop-up. So I wanted that from the beginning. I wanted it to be right away. And that was really good because that first winter, I could already see people switching to email newsletters. And people really like the email newsletters. People love hearing the farm stories. And they just even do it just to hear the stories. And then they tell their friends and the other people, like they literally are telling right in front of me, like, you got to go on our email list, which is pretty insane. But
it is a really cool, like you just have a nice way of writing it really authentically. I remember, again, when you first started your social media, and that was one of the things you wanted some guidance with because you'd never done social media before.
Yeah, I'd never even used Facebook and Instagram before.
But in some ways, I feel like you coming in that way, not having even been a user yourself, you didn't have these expectations of, oh, it needs to be this fancy marketing lingo or anything like that. It was literally just you telling your story about how you moved out to British Columbia and you're starting your farm. And here are my chickens, and here's where I'm expanding next. And look, I moved the pigs over to some fresh grass today, and tell your story about your adventures. And it's just been really interesting to watch. So,
well, and that's like some other farmer that I follow. It's the social proof that's so important because if you're not going to be certified, for example, and it's even more than certification because you can be certified and people don't know what you're doing. So for me, it's really important that they can see on my social media and my email newsletters what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and to be real about it. And like the other farmers in the neighborhood, they don't have the websites and the online store, but how are they raising them? I have no idea. And I've had people ask me, well, how does this neighbor? I'm like, I don't know. But that was important to me because that's like I want to be authentic and real. And so, yeah, from the get-go, those are the things that I learned from you and other people in the courses.
You also said when you were in Eastern Canada, before you moved out to BC, you were starting to think about this. You were buying from regenerative farms. You were a customer. And so I remember you saying that you kind of had these things that were pet peeves of your own as a customer, and you knew that you wanted to make a better customer experience for your future customers. And I think that probably helped you guide you in some of these things too.
Yeah, definitely. And that's when I chose to do the selling by product variant, which I'd never heard of before. But that was a big one, and because most places are sold by pound, but then you're like, well, I don't want a small one. You have to go back and forth. You want a small one, a bigger one, and this size and that size. I've never had any customer need to ask me that because it's all on the website.
And so they can just decide, do I want a bigger cut? Do I want a bigger chicken? Do I want a smaller chicken? They don't have to say that one's too big. Do you do it the same way at the farmer's market where they can, where it's priced per cut or per chicken, or do you do an exact weight at the farmer's market?
At the market, I do price per pound, and then the packages say price per pound. And then I just round up and down because my online store is connected to my phone, which is how I process the point of sale. So I just round. And for the farmer's market people, I just round down. Like even if it's like $21.80, I'll make it 21. And it kind of makes them feel good. And they came out, and I just round down. I don't deal with the cents. So that's kind of what I do. But the system is connected.
Got it. And for everybody listening, we did build yours on Shopify, and so you're using Shopify's point of sale. When Rachel came to me, she said, I want to sell on Shop Local, and I said, we can't do that in Canada. And so we decided to go with Shopify, and it was actually the first time I'd worked with Shopify, so it was a good learning experience for me too. Now I've worked with several clients that have Shopify. That was the beginning, so... Okay, so you started with your meat chickens, you started with eggs. I remember we talked about the, egg shortages at this time last year. That really kind of benefited you sometimes because people were looking for eggs and you had them, right? You got your solar lights so that they are hopefully laying year round because winters in British Columbia are not mild. Is that a safe way to say it?
Yeah, here in the north, we can go -40, -50, but this year it's so unusual. Like we're in +5 right now, and it's raining. Like it's very unusual. Like normally it'd be -20, -40.
But the animals are all doing okay. You've got, like you said, mobile shelters for them that you move around, and you're fencing to move them around so that this time of year, they're not on fresh grass, obviously, but you can move them around during the growing season. You've got your pigs. You did your first round of pigs the first year, and how did that go?
Yeah, that went really well. Like moving them on pasture is actually really easy. I was really happy how that worked. And I'm gonna get the same pigs this year because part of it is the breed was bred out for good temperament, and so I think these guys were just naturally calm. And yeah, keeping them happy. Every animal, like even the laying chickens, they rarely come out of their fence, and they can fly over if they wanted to, if they get scared by something. But mostly, you just got to move them soon enough, and they know that they love going to the new grass, and they just go with it.
And then the sheep are new this year, right? So is that the only new plan for this year? Or I know you were thinking maybe beef eventually, but not yet. Sheep first.
Oh, yeah, I had a really good opportunity for beef right now, but I'm like, I'm going to stretch myself too thin if I start. But yeah, maybe next year, because I'll just start with small amounts so the beef and the sheep can be together, and they will go in front of the chickens, and they'll basically mow the lawn, and for the fencing even, that's useful. And at one point, they might move faster than the chickens, although with 200 layers, you move them every like 3 or 4 days because the impact, even though they have huge open net, they make an impact. So they might move fast enough together, but I might have to separate them. And I have solar fencers that I can do that.
So you're doing all of this yourself. You built everything. Is the kind of building and infrastructure, has that slowed down for you now a year and a half in, or are you still doing, improving that or adding to that as you go?
I had hoped at this point to be done building stuff, but because I moved to a new property, I will need to do some updates. And this year was a bit different because I live in a pretty high predator area. Like I'm by the river, and grizzlies and bears and cougars and everything really is here, and the aerial predators. So I got 3 guard dogs, one that'll stay with each of the chickens and with the sheep. And so what I've seen, even like farmers in the United States have they just expand their electric net really large then, and the dog is in there with the chickens, and it just gives the dog enough space. So that's something a bit new to me this year, because otherwise I had dogs around the property, but even I've had an aerial predator come in and kill something because the dog wasn't nearby. So this year they're going to be in. So that's going to be a challenge because I want the dogs to be happy and content, and so we're going to see how that goes. But I've seen many other farmers do it, so I know it works. and they just know their purpose. You got to make sure that they're happy as much as the chickens and pigs are happy too.
Have you been shipping your meat at all, or is your online store strictly for pickup at the farmers markets and pickup at the farm?
Right now it's pickup at the farmers markets, and it's switched to, like, the one market here is only in summer. So I essentially switched in wintertime to drop-offs and deliveries. And so that's when there's more uptake on online purchases. Yeah, the shipping meat, right now, I sell the meat fast enough at the markets. I don't need to. My thing that I was considering doing it is because the drive to the city market is so far. And in winter weather, I'm a confident driver and enjoy driving even in winter, but that road is really bad. And like, I actually get scared now of driving on it. So then I was kind of thinking, like, the whole shipping of meat, but I don't think we're ready for that here. The online buying is still a little bit slower because I don't think people are quite ready for that. They're really about going to the market. So it's an option there. Like, and this is the other thing I found out. Like, I was thinking, oh, if I really expand, I can ship the meat, like, even to Vancouver area, because I know I've had a couple of people from Vancouver ask for my eggs. But we talked about shipping eggs could be a problem. Anyways, so I know that there's markets there, but I don't think I'll need them. There's enough market here that I don't need to do that. I would only want to do it if I get enough customers buying online that I could ship to them, and then I didn't have to drive in wintertime. That would be a huge thing for me. And I'm not there yet, and the customers aren't quite there yet. So that's maybe something in the future.
So I remember, again, when we first were talking, you had a plan for, and we don't have to say the details, but you said, I have this much savings that I can put into my farm, and then I need to make this much the first year, and then I need to make this much the first year, and then I don't remember exactly what the timeline was, but at some point I'm going to be able to pay myself that fair living wage that you mentioned earlier. And I'm curious, is it working? Are you on track? Are you hitting those milestones? Have you hit those milestones the way that you had hoped?
So this is my third year, and the third year is when it was supposed to start paying me. And so the second year, I learned how you have to be prepared for failures or whatever. So like the first one, I slaughtered the chickens too early, the first batch, because I wanted to make a small chicken for customers because I know that they really like the small, but they were too small. So that actually, having even a little bit of too small chicken really impacts the overall. There was a bit of a loss there. I was like, wow, okay. And then the second time I had, out of the 5 batches I did, I had one batch that just didn't do well. That happens. And that cut into the cost. So that was a good learning lesson. Like, obviously things aren't going to work out perfectly. So even now I'm feeling that. So that last year my income was a bit less than I had anticipated. Then because I moved this year, so last year I was going to start the sheep and the pork and continue the pork. And that, if I had done that last year, then this third year would for sure, it would be then where I'd be making my living wage. So it's going to be basically bumped a year, kind of with those setbacks in the lamb and the pork. But I'm still, like, it's paying my personal expenses and it's paying my farm expenses just so. And it might be the fourth year where I might end up having to give myself a buffer.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate that you're sharing this because I know that that feels kind of personal, at least to me, but that, you know, it is paying your expenses. You are not dipping into your savings anymore. It is paying for your own food and shelter and all of those types of things that you need. So that's fantastic to hear. I'm just pleased as punch hearing this story because, like, you came in and you were like, I'm going to do this and this is what I'm going to do, and I have all these spreadsheets and I need your help with marketing, and I'm going to go move out to the wilderness and I'm going to build these things myself. And, like, I mean, you're almost off the grid in some ways. It just is so impressive to me that it is working the way that you said it was going to. It's fantastic. There's an organization in British Columbia that helped you find your first property that you were leasing, right? And then did they help you find the second one as well?
Yeah, so Young Agrarians is what the organization is called. And yeah, they helped me. I was working with a couple different people because I was looking all across British Columbia. And it's great because they also help you with the lease paperwork. And because they've worked with many other people, they also kind of know all the different questions to ask to kind of just make sure it's a fit or not a fit. And then the second lease I found outside of that. So I'm paying high, like I'm paying like market lease and rent now, but I'm ready at that stage, whereas I wouldn't have been in the beginning. But yeah. Yeah, Young and Grands is a pretty cool organization that they do that.
Okay, so I just have this feeling that there are people listening who have been running a farm a lot longer than you, but probably don't have the same handle on making it work, like financially, as you do. So, what would your advice be to people who are having a hard time making their regenerative farm, cash flow or making it work out financially?
Yeah, like I haven't totally figured it out, but definitely you have to figure out all your expenses and that the price that you have on your product is covering that. And the production cost, which is the food and oyster shell or whatever, but also the overhead farm costs. And so for the basic thing I would say, if you haven't, which I mean, probably most people have, is to at least put down every time you spend money. Because then at least you know what you're spending money on. If you don't know what to project, at least if you are putting down every single day you spend something, then at the end of the year, you know how much it costs. And then you look at your price. And then, like when I get all my chicken back, like 250 of them at a time, I count them all, one for the website with the variant price weights, but also I know what that batch is going to bring in based on my prices. And then if that total isn't paying the expenses, well, then you kind of got to adjust the prices. Or like I'm trying to expanding into the lamb and the pork will help round everything out because the chickens are expensive because they eat grain and the pork too. Whereas getting into some of the cattle and the sheep, well, cattle to buy right now is expensive, but the sheep, hopefully you can get that return a bit better because they're out there grazing. But yeah, you have to know what your expenses are and then to figure out what you're going to come in. So you got to just do the math on it. And it has to be more than the other if you're going to make it.
I was at a conference last week, probably be 2 weeks ago by the time that this podcast airs. It's called the Grassworks Conference in Wisconsin, and it was all about regenerative grazing. You probably would have loved it. You should come down to it sometime, down and over, I guess. But one of the speakers asked the room, they said, how many of you have all of your receipts in a shoebox and you look at them once a year when you get ready to do your taxes? And almost everybody raised their hand and said that was me.
So that's a huge one. Like I got files. So I looked at the tax codes before I started spending. I looked at the tax codes that I knew I had to submit. And then I made a file for each of those tax codes, and my Excel sheet has the tax codes. So every time I spend money, it goes into that tax code. That receipt goes in the folder for that tax code. So it's done. Like just do yourself a favor and do it then.
So you said like then at the end, you said this a couple minutes ago, then at the end of the year, you can look back and see what you spent. But you're not doing that just at the end of the year. You are doing that with every flock, with every litter of pigs. I mean, you're doing that for every production cycle that you have, which is several throughout the year with your meat chickens especially, right?
Yeah, I separate them, and then I have like total of everything, but I separate broilers, layers, pork, so that I can see the production cost of each one, and then I can see what production revenue is coming in from each bird, and production revenue of each lamb, and then the cost of each lamb, so that you can then you want to hit a margin of some sort, and then that margin is what pays off the overhead. So then I have a sheet with the overhead, anything I spend on the farm, and then what's left I want to be able to pay for personal expenses. And because I've done this like for decades for my personal expenses, I kind of know what my personal, so that's how I do it. And it seems big, but you just start with something, like start with food, health, whatever your personal codes are, and then with your animals.
You make it sound so easy, but again, this is not my strength. This is one of your strengths. But I think that this piece of it was key for you to have done everything that you've done since March 2024. I mean, you're saying this is going to be year 3, but it's really not yet. You're not even fully done with 2 years yet, right? So we're getting there.
I wanted to say one other piece about the financials, because you mentioned that for new people, because any new person, I wish I had known this, it just happened. So you can't get loans when you're starting out. you're self-employed, you can't get loans for maybe 2 or 3 years of taxes. And I was lucky because Shopify, for example, so this is, I guess, is a plug for Shopify. They, over the course of my sales, they give me capital funding, and at like a 6% interest rate. But the way they collect the payments is based on your daily sales. So if you make a lot, you pay 25% of that, and if you make less, you just pay less. That was huge. And the other huge, okay, so this is the other thing. Try to, if you can, if you're starting out, try to start with enough volume that someone like that would give you funding. That's useful. And the other part was I spent everything like on credit cards in the beginning. So, and I got into a business credit card right away. But a huge thing that helped me so much is a line of credit. They just pre-approved it. But that was after a year of spending and a year of paying everything on time.
Was the line of credit through the credit card company, not through a bank, right?
Because the banks won't give you loans or anything. So that was massive because that's my buffer. Like, when I'm paying for slaughter every month, paying for feed every month, they're huge. And I haven't brought the sales in yet. So having those two sources of funding were unexpected and totally helpful.
Yeah, we use Stripe for our credit card processing, and it does the same thing. I get emails every once in a while that says you're pre-approved for X amount. It's basically like a line of credit, like you said, capital financing or like a line of credit. So that's a really good tip. And I think that makes sense because they being Shopify or the credit card or Stripe, the credit card processor, like they've seen your sales, they know your numbers, and they're making money off of you every time you run a credit card anyway. Gosh, sometimes it makes my stomach hurt to think how much the money is going through these companies, and how much they're making on those fees and interest. But then they're making interest on you too, and so it works for them to be a little bit riskier because they have that data right in front of them as opposed to a traditional bank, so. Yeah. What's your advice for starting out with marketing?
Tell your story and what you're doing, and how are you going to tell people? If it's your newspaper, go to the local newspaper. But I use social media for sure, Facebook and Instagram. But the algorithms, only a certain percentage of people will see some of that. So having the email newsletters right away. And the other thing I really found at Christmas time, I went to the big, like your local town or city, their Facebook pages. And I'm like, you looking for Christmas chicken this year? There's local fresh chicken. I bring deliveries, and so people know when to buy it, where to buy it, how to buy it. You have to give them the facts and who you are and where you're from, and give them a nice picture. And then people will then put your website or your Facebook so they can go and check you out. And so when I did that, I had 12 new email subscribes that night, and people were going on my Facebook page. You could just see the numbers. So. Yeah, the big thing is how are you going to tell them? And for me, it was social media, email newsletters, and then I did tear-off sheets. I wanted every single way that people could find me. And on the website, the other big thing is a Google profile, because I know when I was looking for when I was buying regenerative meat, I was Googling in the area farms that are located, and the ones that popped up, I went to the website and checked them out, checked the prices out. So all that information, you need to have I think, have a website or something with your prices and what you're selling. Because the customer, like Katie talks about this, if they can't find the information, then it basically stops. But if they can find every information, that's what.
Yeah, they're going to go to somebody else where they can find it. They don't want to go back and forth. And yep, exactly. That's really good advice. The other thing, you mentioned like your community pages or Facebook groups that you can post in. One thing that struck me lately is that a lot of times I will see somebody in one of those groups that will say, like, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. I'm looking for eggs. I'm looking for, whatever it might be. And a whole bunch of farmers will come in and they will maybe just leave their website or leave their Facebook page or whatever. I would totally encourage you, if you're not doing this already, Rachel, put a little bit more than just that, and in your case, like, we raise our chickens regeneratively. We rotate them on pasture, whatever, they're free range, they're whatever it might be that makes yours a little bit special. that is going to make you stand out in that sea of responses too. Instead of the person that asked the question is going to get a list of farms that, again, they need to go to the website or the Facebook page to try to see what's going on. But if you can share a little info or share a picture, like you have, that's one thing. Even when you first got your animals, you took great pictures, again, with the mountains and the trees in the background. It's so beautiful. Someday I just really want to come and visit. So someday I'm going to do a tour of all these farmers that I've worked with. So, well, this has been really good advice for everybody. For everybody listening, I don't think I said it at the top of the podcast, and I should have, but I know I've mentioned it throughout. Grazing Patch Farms with an S. Is it S or without the S? Grazing Patch Farm is the name of Rachel's farm. Look it up on Facebook and scroll to the beginning and read her posts about how she got started, because it is inspiring and it just makes me go, if you have a great variety of experience, Rachel, but if you can move out to the wilderness and do this basically on your own, like, gosh, the rest of us should be able to get up on Monday morning and work just as hard and, make it happen, right? So thank you for being inspiring and for being a great client. I had a really good time working on your project, so.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy I found and heard of you, because it was the perfect person.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to choplocaluniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.